The quill trembled slightly in his hand, its tip poised above the paper. Lamplight flickered on the ink bottle, casting long shadows across the cramped Cleveland office. Outside, the clamor of wagons and shouting dock workers filled the streets. But inside this room, the world narrowed to a single point. The boy's hand, the ledger before him, and the possibility that one mistake could collapse the fragile trust he had only just begun to earn. 16 years old, scarcely more than a child by appearance, yet John Davidson Rockefeller bore the expression of someone twice his age. He was not merely writing numbers, he was staking his future on their perfection. The tension of that moment did not fade with the closing of the ledger. It lived in him, pulsed through every stroke of ink, every coin he handled, every line he ruled with steady hand. Long before oil fields, before the empire of Standard Oil, before wealth that rivaled nations, there was this crucible, the dim office of Hewitt Tuttle, a produce commission house in Cleveland, where Rockefeller first learned the unforgiving logic of commerce. To the casual eye, Cleveland in the mid-1850s was a muddy town in the making, perched on Lake Erie, straining to become more than a frontier port. Yet to the young clerk, its restless rhythm was intoxicating. Barges unloaded grain, barrels of pork rolled onto docks, crates of hides and wool passed through warehouses. Every wagon wheel creak, every shout of a trader was a reminder. Money moved here, vast and swift, and it moved through the ledgers. Numbers were not abstractions, they were power. And power, Rockefeller had already decided, must be mastered. It had taken him weeks of rejection to land this job. He had walked from office to office, knocking on doors, presenting himself with stiff politeness, only to be turned away. Employers wanted men, not boys. Clerks were plentiful, but John persisted, wearing his patched coat with quiet dignity, until Hewitt Tuttle gave him a chance. The wages were paltry, 50 cents a day, barely enough to sustain a family if he'd had one, yet to him they were gold. Each coin was independence from his father's shadow, each day's labor a step toward proving he could be something greater than the son of a quack peddler and a stern homemaker. The office itself was modest. A few battered desks, a stove sputtering in the corner, stacks of papers and ledgers crowding the walls. Yet for Rockefeller, it might as well have been a cathedral. Here, amid the smell of ink and produce, there was order. The columns of numbers stood like pillars, upright and unbending. They demanded discipline, precision, obedience. They offered no mercy for mistakes, and he loved them for it. From the start, he carried himself with a solemnity unusual in one so young. Other clerks might grumble, scribble carelessly, or leave early when the day grew long. John never did. He arrived on time, worked steadily, and lingered after others had gone, determined to balance every figure before extinguishing his lamp. His handwriting was neat, his sums exact, his manner grave. He spoke little, observed much, and absorbed everything. The work was not glamorous, but he treated it as sacred. Account for everything, he repeated inwardly, a command instilled by his mother Eliza. Waste nothing, forget nothing, let every cent be measured. His employers noticed. At first, they handed him the simplest tasks, copying invoices, checking totals, tallying small accounts. But as weeks turned to months without error, they trusted him with more. Soon he was reconciling shipments, balancing books, preparing reports. By the end of his first year, the boy was indispensable. He had become, as one associate later said, a machine for figures, never tired, never inaccurate.
Yet it was not precision alone that set him apart. It was hunger. Behind the quiet discipline lay an ambition that never slept. He studied not only the numbers, but the men around him. How Hewitt and Tuttle negotiated contracts, how they extended credit, how they spread risk across shipments. He watched how fortunes shifted with the weather, how one bad crop could ruin a farmer, how one clever bargain could enrich a merchant. He memorized prices, tracked fluctuations, and began to see patterns invisible to others. He understood, even then, that commerce was less about chance than about control, and control began with the ledger. Still, the shadows of his upbringing pressed close. His father, William "Big Bill" Rockefeller, drifted in and out of the family's life. A tall, sharp-eyed peddler who sold miracle cures and vanished for months on end. When he appeared, he mocked John's clerking. "You'll never get rich copying another man's books," he sneered, tossing a coin in the air with practiced ease. The words stung. John did not answer, but in the privacy of his thoughts, he vowed his father was both right and wrong. He would not remain a clerk forever. But it was through these very ledgers, these very figures, that he would find the path to freedom. His mother's influence was equally strong. Eliza demanded piety, thrift, and obedience. She expected John to hand over his wages, to live simply, to keep his soul clean of pride. John complied outwardly, giving her his coins, attending church, singing hymns with steady voice. Yet inside, ambition swelled. He kept his own small ledger, recording every personal expense, calculating how long it would take to save enough to strike out on his own. His life became a paradox, devotion and rebellion intertwined, humility masking hunger. The wider world only sharpened this tension. America in the 1850s was a place of turmoil. Markets rose and collapsed, banks failed, speculation ran rampant. Merchants gambled fortunes on shipments delayed by storms or lost to fire. Fortunes were made in a season and lost the next. To Rockefeller, this chaos was both warning and opportunity. It revealed a brutal law. Only those who mastered discipline, who imposed order on uncertainty, could endure. Others might fall, but he would stand. Every day in the office confirmed this belief. He learned how Hewitt and Tuttle protected themselves by diversifying cargoes, how they negotiated favorable terms, how they measured trust before extending credit. He saw the fragility of commerce, how one dishonest partner could bring ruin, and the power of credibility, how a reputation for honesty could open doors that money alone could not. Above all, he saw that behind every barrel of produce, every wagon load of grain, there was a number. And if one could control the numbers, one could control everything. At night, walking home through Cleveland's muddy streets, John carried these lessons like scripture. While other youths idled in taverns or courted girls, he rehearsed sums, imagined ventures, calculated profits. The figures whispered possibilities, drawing him into a future where he would no longer copy accounts, but command them. The dream was not idle fancy. It was a fire banked and hidden, but burning steadily. The burden was heavy. There were nights when exhaustion blurred the columns before his eyes, when doubt gnawed at him, when his father's mocking voice echoed too loud. Yet each time he returned to the ledger. The balance of numbers steadied him, as prayer steadied his mother. If faith taught him salvation, accounting taught him survival. Together, they forged an unbreakable creed: discipline, order, persistence. As months turned to years, Rockefeller's transformation deepened. He was no longer merely a boy clerk. He was becoming a strategist. He began to anticipate the firm's needs before they were spoken, drafting reports, smoothing the path for decisions. His employers trusted him with greater secrets of trade, and he absorbed them with voracious attention. His life narrowed to a sharp point: numbers, discipline, ambition. The contrast with his peers was stark. Other young men of his age drifted between jobs, spent freely when paid, and courted ruin with careless living. John lived in a different world. He saved obsessively, counted every cent, denied himself pleasures, and measured his worth not by what he spent, but by what he withheld. "Save, and ye shall have," his mother had said, and he obeyed with almost religious fervor. His savings grew, coin by coin, until he could see the possibility of something larger. And then came the Panic of 1857. Banks collapsed, businesses failed, thousands were thrown into ruin. Cleveland trembled as merchants shuttered their doors, shipments halted, credit vanished. For Rockefeller, it was a revelation. He watched as men who had mocked his frugality fell into bankruptcy, their fortunes evaporating overnight. He, by contrast, endured. His wages were steady, his savings intact, his discipline unshaken. The storm confirmed what he had always believed: discipline was stronger than chance. In those days of panic, he learned lessons no book could teach. He saw how fear spread faster than fire, how credit collapsed when trust dissolved, how opportunity appeared in the ashes of ruin. He saw that survival was itself power, and that those who endured could seize what others had lost. It was a harsh lesson, but it hardened his resolve. He would not gamble, he would not waste, he would build slowly, carefully, relentlessly, until nothing could shake his foundation. Years later, when he commanded Standard Oil, when he bent railroads and markets to his will, Rockefeller would remember these days. He would say that the Panic of 1857 had been the school of adversity that taught him more than any classroom. And he would remember the cramped office of Hewitt and Tuttle, where a boy first discovered that the world could be tamed through numbers. But even then, as a teenager, he knew something profound. He was not meant to remain a clerk. He was learning, absorbing, preparing. The ledgers were not his destination, they were his apprenticeship. He dreamed of partnership, of enterprise, of commanding money rather than serving it. He confided little of this, spoke even less, but inside, the vision sharpened. He would not merely make a living, he would make a fortune. He would not merely succeed, he would dominate. The transformation was almost invisible to those around him. To his employers, he was a dependable clerk. To his mother, a dutiful son. To his father, a boy trapped in drudgery. But within, John D. Rockefeller was forging the steel of character that would one day make him the richest man in America. Every figure balanced, every coin saved, every doubt conquered, was another hammer blow shaping the empire to come. The boy at the desk, quill scratching under lamplight, had no oil wells, no railroads, no armies of lawyers, but he had something more enduring: discipline. And discipline, as he was discovering line by line, could move mountains.